Bismillah ar Rahim. We're back with another In Context. Today is September 7th. The topic today is the Russian-Ukraine war. There's a lot to cover here. In other words, how it started, where it's headed. And between A and B, you got a bunch of US and Russia propaganda we need to sift through. I figured I'll open up the table to you guys. What do you think on this war?
Well, I mean, I just read this morning that Russia launched the largest attack of the war. 800 some drones. They killed infants. 1,000. Okay, it was 800 this morning. They killed infants. They bombed the presidential palace, and it's only getting worse. Whatever happened in that meeting in Alaska clearly has gone completely south, which I think we all knew was going to happen anyways. But I feel like at this point, Putin almost is in a position where he knows that the United States isn't going to do anything. And he probably could march a full army right on into Kyiv, and the Americans would still do nothing. And I think he's starting to feel more empowered. I think he realizes Trump is really, really compromised on multiple levels right now. I mean, this Epstein stuff is getting weirder by the day. How Trump was a informant for the FBI the whole time. He was on the inside. And nobody buys that, obviously. So I feel like Putin is at a point now where he's going to really start unleashing the big guns, knowing that there's no pushback. And I feel like, I don't know what the EU is going to do. I don't think they have the capacity to really do all that much other than maybe economic and political sanctions kind of stuff. But as for a military response, I think Russia's got carte blanche to do whatever they want right now in Ukraine, and they know that. And, with Trump fooling around in Venezuela and doing other things, it's clear that his attention isn't really on Russia-Ukraine. And I think anybody with a brain, and Putin is a clever guy. You got to give him credit. He's a statesman of sorts. He knows exactly what he can get away with, and he's getting away with it. It's just like Netanyahu. It's the same kind of, these guys can read the tea leaves, and they know who they're working with, and they're working with an idiot who's running the most powerful country in the world, and they're taking full advantage of that. And I think Ukraine is just going to continue to spiral out of control and get worse. I don't see any let up in that regard. Especially now that, Russia feels empowered. Like, why would they back down? Why would they want to have a ceasefire or a deal when they're really sort of starting to, assert their objectives more directly? So that's sort of how I see it right now.
I just comment on a couple of points. So I don't doubt that Trump is self-involved on a level that is unseen in Western governments. There are, similarities to a lot of the colonial dictatorships in his behavior. Even the sycophantic behavior of his Speaker of the House, this is unheard of in US politics. But yeah, this is a well-known characteristic of colonial political orders, where the servants come out to float all kinds of fiction to serve the great chief. It's interesting to watch. It's a new feature in US politics. Generally speaking, the degradation of the evil empire is good news for humanity. So I'm not sad. However, all that said, there is an existing an institution and structure for US policy, and even regardless of all the self-involvement of Trump with himself, there is an order to this madness. The US is actually setting Europe against Russia and taking a backseat. The US is trying to contain Europe and Russia in each other. That's why the US is taking a backseat. Russia is obviously stronger than Ukraine. It has more strategic depth than Ukraine. The demands of the Europeans and the Ukrainians are ludicrous because they do not reflect the state of force balance on the field. Their references to justice and international order is just nonsense, because there is no such thing as an international legal system. So this is all rubbish. However, there is a lot of Western support to Ukraine. Even as the US takes a backseat, it's selling arms to Ukraine financed by Europe. So the Ukraine is not powerless, on the other hand. I think what we're seeing is negotiation by fire right now. So the US is essentially hanging Ukraine and Europe to dry. And Russia sees that and is going after it to prove to them that you guys don't have the power to win. We have the power to win. So this has to end closer to our terms, if not completely on our terms. So that's what we're seeing.
I would say, just in response to that, I would say not closer, but on their terms at this point. I don't, and this is the problem for Ukraine. I feel like if Ukraine said, okay, you can have Donetsk, you can have the entire eastern border, it's all yours, just end this war. I honestly believe that if they made that offer, Russia would say, well, now we want this next region, the border of that border now, right? I think that there is no, I think if appeasement or giving Putin what he wants, he's going to keep taking that until he gets all the way to Kyiv. That's how I see it at this point. So I don't know what the solution is. To be honest, the solution probably is drawing the lines where they're currently at and then putting international troops at the border to not let Putin expand any further. That's probably realistically the actual solution.
That seems where things are heading with de facto admission of Russia taking over the lands it controls. That's like where things are heading, really.
But for that to work, there would have to be an international force on that new border of the new land Russia controls in old Ukraine. And I don't even know if the will for that is there. And if that isn't there, then Putin's going to keep like a cancer spreading all the way to the Kyiv.
If you hear carefully what the Russians are saying, they're saying we have no problem with Ukraine joining the EU. We have a problem with forces in there, but actually what they are saying is not straightforward, because they're saying we're going to bomb them. Yes, as long as war is going on, they're going to bomb them, but nobody's talking about putting European forces in Ukraine while the war is going on. Even the Europeans are not saying we're going to bring forces to support Ukraine in the war. What they are talking about is, as a part of an agreement, we're going to bring the so-called reassurance forces. So Russia is saying we're going to do things that has no context, because the forces are not there to bomb. But what they're saying is, right now our negotiating position is we don't want them. Okay, fine. Also, Ukraine's negotiating position is we're not going to accept that Russia takes any land by force. These are negotiating positions. The final deal looks something similar to what seems similar to what you're talking about. But I think at this point we have to go back and try to understand the context. So the context here, I think, has to go in two stages. The Russian policy, since Putin took over in 1999-2000 until 2022, when he launched the second war on Ukraine. And then the Russian policy beyond war on Ukraine. I think the Russian policy between 2000 and 2022 was a policy of trying to influence and control the previous states of the Soviet Union through minority politics, meaning using Russian minorities everywhere, and through military intervention in undeclared ways. This has been used effectively and successfully in Georgia. It has been used effectively and less successfully in Crimea. What was going on between 2014 and 2022 is Russia lost political control over Ukraine, and the Russia-supported factions in Ukraine were successfully taken out of the political order. That was the Russian problem. That wasn't successful in Georgia, so no problems are happening in Georgia right now. But it happened in Ukraine. And instead of Putin trying to regain political influence, he decided to actually challenge the international order. The problem in 2022 was not that Trump was trying to exercise influence in Ukraine. He has been doing that for the last 22 years. It wasn't even that he was trying to take over land. He has done that in Crimea and was accepted. And he pretended that the little green men were out of outer space, aliens, not Russian soldiers in green fatigues. So he accepted the fiction. So the US and Europe were fine playing the game within these limits. What happened is Putin made a strategic decision to challenge the international order when he tried to invade Kyiv. The point was not that he was trying to take over land. He was trying to take over all of Ukraine, change political realities through force in Europe. This was an unacceptable challenge to the rules of the colonial international Western order. And that was the problem there. And that's why they fought him off. And that failed. The Europeans and the US, Biden managed to contain it, and it failed. Whether he managed to get land or didn't manage to get land, that is beside the point, because, land disputes and trying to gain influence through indirect ways, this is acceptable within the rules of the game. But the problem was he tried to challenge the order itself. That failed.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that for quite a long time now, Putin has been interfering with former Soviet states, Georgia. I was in Georgia a few years ago, actually. And it's a really fun, nice little country. Very friendly people. But, I was talking to the tour guide, and they were telling me that, Russia is, they all know that Russia's right on the door. They're already controlling Abkhazia, and they're just waiting for the next round of, it's like they just have to live with these people knowing that they're constantly going to be harassed. And it's like, the logic the Georgians have is like, you just got to get ready for it mentally, because it's going to happen. And if you're not mentally ready for it, it becomes harder to deal with. And it just seems like a very unpleasant situation these people are having to live through. And, it's just really, to me, it seems like the expansionist agenda of Russia is not going to be stopped or challenged anytime soon, and it's going to just continue. And it's going to disturb and mess up the post-colonial European order. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how, once this sort of the veneer of the civil society is ripped off, who's going to invade who next, right? As you said, one of the red lines in the post-World War II order was changing governments and countries by force in Europe, right? Now that line has been sort of crossed, I mean, who's to say that other countries, potentially even in Europe, probably will start in Eastern Europe, but who knows how far it will spread of border shifts and this kind of violence that people thought was over after World War II in the creation of, stronger international institutions. But yeah, with Trump in power, destroying those institutions at a time when they probably need to, for the sake of preserving the old order, if that's what you're into, they need to be there more than ever. It's really unfortuitous times, let's put it that way, to have Trump in power at this historical moment. Which to me, is somebody who doesn't value the post-World War II international order all that much. It's sort of interesting, but the truth is, it still affects all of us, whether we like what's going on or not. We're gonna all have to deal with these shifts, and these shifts are going to be dislocating and challenging for all of us, our families. I mean, I see the rise in racism, just overt Islamophobia in the United States, and these people are literally having Laura Loomer straight in Trump's ear, dictating policy. This is scary stuff. Huckabee's statements are shocking. You think the statements of J.D. Vance were crass, which they were outrageous. But Huckabee, I mean, this is crazy stuff. The guy's literally talking about battles of good and evil, and his statement was really, he really laid out the evangelical vision, which is, it doesn't matter who the Israeli government is. He said that. He's not about supporting this government. He probably hates this government too, just like everybody hates Netanyahu. Even the supporters think he's a jerk, but it's about this broader eschatological vision of the state of Israel. See, and he literally said, it doesn't matter if you like the Israeli government or not, we got to side with the forces of good against evil. This is really crazy messianic stuff. This is the stuff that they accuse Muslims of talking about. And and again, it's just another act of projection. I think the evangelical Christians, everything
our race is good. Other races are bad.
Everything the evangelical Christians accuse Muslims of doing are exactly what themselves are doing. It's classic projection from a psychological perspective. So when they accuse Muslims of, wanting to conquer and take over, that's they're basically telling you this is what we want to do. We're just putting your name as the actor as we tell you our plan. And then you see, stuff going on, there's debates in Texas about prayer in school where it basically is, clearly it's meant to be a Christian prayer, and they're not even hiding that discussion anymore. For the last 40 years, that debate's been going on within the Republican Party, but it's always been masked as, everyone should have the right to pray. But now you have Bill Paxton or whatever his name is in Texas, basically saying it's a Christian prayer and the Muslims should just, they should pray the Christian prayer or shut up. This is really where we're headed. So all of these major shifts that are happening at the international level that are also filtering into the domestic level are not going to be pleasant for Muslims, especially those of us who are more religious and practicing. those who wear hijab, those who have beards. It's going to get harder and harder. And I think we need to be aware of that and be prepared. Otherwise, we're going to be swept up and not have any idea what to do when it happens. All politics is local. You said that to me before we started.
Yes, you're right. I want to distinguish between two things. Putin's attempt to challenge the Western international order, that was an attempt to disrupt the order, and it failed. It failed completely when the West aligned behind Biden, and Biden managed to regain the complete control of the US over the order and stabilize the hold of the US. However, the current challenge is from Trump. So Trump is challenging the international order established by the US after World War II, both in terms of its political norms, as he sets Europe against Russia and takes a back seat, because that changes the standard of the order, which is there is one Western alliance led by the US that stands in front of the whole world. He's taking a back seat, so that changes the actual political structure of the order. He's also challenging the economic foundations of the order through his 1920s style tariffs. He skips 100 years of economic history right there. So the current challenge is more significant because it comes from the head of the order. And whether it's going to manage to undermine the order or not, it's not obvious, but it's obvious that the order is in flux. I'm not debating that. I want to go back to Ukraine specifically because I want to focus on a lot of Muslims buying into the Russian propaganda and US propaganda narratives in the Russia-Ukraine war. And I want to address that directly. Russian propaganda says, well, the US interfered with us. The US is trying to bring Russia down, or the West is trying to bring Russia down. The Western or US propaganda says Russia is an evil empire. It wants to kill and maim and destroy the peaceful West. Both are propaganda. And yes, as Muslims, there is something called right and wrong. Bombing kids in Kiev is wrong. To justify this because, well, we want to stick it to the US is not correct. When the West bombs kids in Gaza, that is horrible and inhuman and wrong. When Russia bombs kids in Kiev, that is horrible and wrong. You can't accept it in one place and reject it in another place because munkar is munkar. Let's make this clear. On the other hand, the Russian propaganda that Russia was sitting peacefully in its place and the US came to interfere with it is complete nonsense. Russia has had a policy of trying to interfere and control former Soviet states. Muslims buying into this nonsense. Well, it was Russia's right because it was part of the Soviet Union. This is buying into colonial policy. Fine. The fact that Russia was colonizing these lands under the guise of the communist Soviet order doesn't make it the right.
To take this view, if you take the view that these are Russian lands are just taking back, then to be logically consistent, you should also say that Yugoslavia were mostly dominated by Serbia. That means Bosnia should be taken back by Serbia as well. It's the same logic. You can't support Russia, but Yugoslavia is different. Like, you have to be consistent, right? So, like, if you support Putinism, then you're basically supporting...
Aside from consistency, there is ma'ruf and...
Of course. Yeah.
Coming to steal your land and kill your kids and steal your money is munkar. What is this nonsense? Well, Russia was managed to occupy these lands under the use of communism, so it has a right to it. What gives? This is Russian propaganda. Well, and the US is trying to invade Russia. The US wasn't trying to invade Russia. The US isn't trying to invade Russia right now. One of the foreign policy goals of the US throughout Biden administration, throughout Obama, Trump, Biden, and the current Trump and Biden and the current Trump administration is Russia should not fall. Because if Russia fell, then it leaves a void in Central Asia, and that void is going to be filled by China. And China is the important enemy or rival. So it has always been US policy that, yes, Russia needs to be contained, but it should not be allowed to fail. There is a distinction. Now, Russian propaganda doesn't like to admit that, but we shouldn't buy into this. We should see things as they are. So the business of, well, and they were trying to join NATO, and that was not true. Up to the day Russia launched war, Actually, what was happening is Ukraine was trying to join the EU and trying to bargain by the threat of joining the NATO. That was an act of bargaining. Now, Russia saying, well, we believe that they are going to join NATO. This is a claim. In fact, NATO didn't mind when Russia took over Crimea. So why do you think this is really important? And NATO is not crazy to get into direct war with Russia. Today, NATO is not willing to go into direct war with Russia.
Yeah.
So why do you think? And actually, there is war going on. So this was always Russian propaganda. The business of, well, they were trying to take over Russia. They were not trying to take over Russia. They will not even try to take over Ukraine, although they took over the Baltic states. So yes, they will take over things when they see it, because these are international powers that have no they have no respect for their treaties. So if they agreed with Russia that we're not going to take over the Baltic states into NATO, if they see a chance, they will do it. There is nothing like legal concepts in international relations. Thieves stealing each other. That's what you have. That's about it. They tried to make it respectable, but you shouldn't buy into this. But in Ukraine, they knew they couldn't take it. That's why they accepted the fiction of, well, Crimea through the green little men. They accepted the fiction because they know this is a fight. So the Russian propaganda is completely groundless. On the other hand, the Western propaganda, and we are there to protect freedom. Come on. That even, between Muslims, anybody buying into this has more serious problems that we can discuss, really.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. I think that, I just, as I follow these events, it's just sad to see the lack of agency that Muslims have right now. We are really the victims of history at this point. We've lost the ability to control our own destiny in many ways, and in terms of geopolitics as things currently stand. And it's just really catastrophic. And I don't know, how do we reclaim that agency when the rulers of most of these countries are bad? You know what I mean?
As long as we don't,
bad people ruling these countries, there's very little hope as things currently stand for a quick turnaround, because, the people who are supposed to be the leaders of the political leaders of the Ummah are really some of the worst people out there, worst people in the.
They don't belong to us. They belong to the colonial order. So it makes sense that Muslims have no actor in there. As long as we don't have a state that represents our interests, we're not a player. Or as that guy who pretends to be a great guy says, we are in the menu. Because we are not a player. We are not an actor. Until we have an actor, a state that acts on our behalf.
Not to go too far off topic here, but one of the things I do think about regularly is, I would say, for better or worse, Turkey is the country that most people see as the great protector, right? But what happens, like, without even discussing whether that's merited or not, that status, what happens in a couple of years when, very likely, unless there's some kind of underhanded tricks, that the other party wins and takes power? How major of a shift is that going to be in foreign policy? Because I don't see them carrying on the same foreign policy that Erdogan is. That's going to be a real seismic shift, and that's going to have major reverberations across the Muslim world. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but whatever you think it is right now, however bad you think, Turkey's is right now, the alternative is infinitely worse. That's sort of where my position is. What do you think of that?
If the People Party ever get to power, it would be really bad for Turkey and for the region, even for Europe. Yeah. Actually, because Europe now needs Turkey to check Russia. So I don't see the People Party coming to power. However, just the thought exercise is useful, because realizing that Turkey could become actually a actively harmful power just by election tells you that these nation states are not actors for the Ummah. These are actors for those who are in charge of the nation state or the public opinion of the nation state. They are not for them. And if it happens that they align with the Ummah's interest today, tomorrow something else happens.
Yeah.
The Ummah needs a political actor to stand for the Ummah. There might be a hope in Syria, but it's long term, not short. Maybe not. I'm not sure about even whether it's medium term, but it's not short term. Right now, just news flash to those who keep dumping on the Syrian government. This is a country that is under active occupation by three parties in the Western colonial order: the U.S., Russia, and Israel. It's under active occupation. Newsflash. So you need to, tone down your expectations of a country that is under, multi-occupation, of forces that are not even in alliance.
Yeah.
Yep, I see it. I think we got it.
All right.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you, Shabab.
So